This has got to be one of the most stunning views in the whole of the Brecon National Park. I'm standing here on Mynydd Troed, which roughly translated means a mountain shaped like a foot. Behind me is Llangors Lake. It's the biggest natural lake in South Wales. And then in the distance behind that is Pen y Fan. At 886 metres above sea level, it's the highest peak in the whole of southern Britain. For many, the Brecon Beacons is a playground, but for me, it's a place to escape. A place to be alone with nature. And this is a big park. It's 500 square miles and it extends from the English border 10 miles to the east all the way over to Carmarthenshire 30 miles away to the west. And it's not just mountains, it's historical sites and a wide range of fabulous landscapes. In this series I'm exploring the magic of the beacons, its changing beauty over the seasons, its wonderful wildlife and its people. The Brecon Beacons is rightly famous for its mountains and its harsh upland environment. It doesn't get much worse than a day like this in deep midwinter. Now I'm on the eastern edge of the park in the Black Mountains, heading up towards one of the peaks, Tumpa, up there. And this weather wasn't forecast, but that's mountain weather for you, constantly changing. I know from experience that the uplands can be very different to the lowlands, particularly during winter. While conditions on Tumpa's summit are extreme, it's a sunny day in the valley near Heon Wye. Much of the Black Mountains in the eastern part of the Brecon Beacons National Park are 600 metres or 2,000 feet above sea level. It's a wild landscape. But in fact, in common with the rest of the beacons, it's land which has been shaped by people. And this has been going on ever since cutting and digging tools were invented during the Stone Age. The uplands had already been cleared of trees at least 3,000 years before 12th century monks had arrived in the Black Mountains to farm the land and build Llantoni Abbey. It's one of around 250 historical gems that exist in the national park. The Beacons is, and always has been, a landscape that's been worked by people. Wildlife has had to adapt to the many artificial habitats that have been created in the national park. And the Brecon Beacons does have some great wildlife. Much of the Beacons is upland moorland, but around 13% of the national park is covered by trees. I'm travelling to a wood below Sugarloaf Mountain, just outside Abergavenny. It's called St Mary's Vale, and it's one of the oldest woods in the Beacons. But even this isn't a natural wild wood. The fantastic shapes that you see on many of the trees are the result of people managing woodland for timber and charcoal to be used in the coal and steel industries of South Wales. Look at this, the weather's changed again. That's winter in the Brecon Beacons for driving rain now. But I wanted to come and have a closer look at this tree. Just look at the shape of that. And this, of course, is a tree that over hundreds of years has been coppiced several times. And what that's done, it's left you with this unique shape. This base is going to be, what, 300 years old, maybe even more. And relatively speaking, these shoots here are much younger, maybe 100 years old. And if it was still worked now, they'd come back, they'd coppice here again, it'd grow again, and it'd be coppiced over and over. A lot of the landscape in the southern parts of the national park has been shaped by old industries. Spoil tips of old ironworks and coal mines are still visible in many areas, and these are gradually being reclaimed by nature. One of the transport routes of the old industries is the Monmouthshire and Brecon Canal. It's the only canal in the Brecon Beacons and was built over 200 years ago to move coal, lime and wool between rural mid Wales and the industrial south. This part near Llangynyder, around 10 miles south of Brecon, has many locks to cope with the rising height of the canal as it makes its way up the Usk Valley. A section of the canal between two locks is being drained for maintenance work. Once drained, it's time for Mark Prosser and Chris Burrows of the Canal and River Trust to jump in and inspect.
Mind yourself, Chris.
Alright lads.
Hello, how's things?
What's going on?
Oh, just doing some general maintenance to the lock gates, we are.
Well, these gates behind me here. So would you do this fairly regularly just to look at the maintenance work? And
Yeah, go through in the winter and just do general maintenance, because in the summer we don't want to spoil the bunkers holidays and drain sections of work, out to stop people having the holidays,
It's an amazing operation, mind, the way that you drain this particular pool here.
Yeah, well, fair play. For over 200 years ago they designed it very well.
The canal's heyday was during the early 1800s. At its peak, 150,000 tons of coal were transported on the canal each year on barges towed by horses.
Go clear up here. Right up.
No fish, lads?
No
fish, no?
only small ones.
Aye.
They'll survive in the water.
Right, okay.
Yeah.
Well, I'll leave you get on, boys.
Thank you very much.
Nice to see you, boy.
Take care.
Yeah, cheers, thanks very much. Thanks very much.
Think someone's lost a welly?
Yeah. There are hundreds of streams and rivers coming down off the high tops of the Brecon Beacons, but the biggest and the most famous is this one, the River Usk. This is the middle section here. It's not as narrow and not as wild as it is higher up, and it's not as deep and not as meandering as it is further east. And this lovely old bridge here, this is Llangynyder Bridge, a very narrow old bridge. And this is a great spot for looking out for birds like dippers and grey wagtails. They love these rocks here. January is far too early for grey wagtails and dippers to nest. Goosanders, however, are already displaying and mating. The male will soon be leaving Wales to spend the spring and summer in Scandinavia, leaving the female to build a nest and raise her chicks on her own. I find that the winter is an interesting time to explore the beacons. It's relatively quiet. The weather conditions also varies a great deal from day to day and between the lowlands and the uplands, making it challenging and rewarding. And because most of the plants have died back, the small amount of wildlife that's around is easier to see. Much of the lowland in the Usk Valley is farmland, and they say that there are 3,500 miles of hedgerows in the Brecon Beacons. This one is being laid in a traditional way by Trevor Prothero and his son Gwilym at a farm near Brecon. Trevor.
Hello.
Yeah, good to see you, boy.
Nice to meet you, yeah.
Oh, what a nice job.
Thank you.
Cracking. Tell you what, I've always wanted to hedge there. I've always wanted to hedge there. Go on, you keep going,
Yeah.
because I know it's
Okay.
going to get dark before long,
Right
so
on.
you keep going. Now, I was always told that Breconshire people have got their own particular style of edge laying.
Yeah, well, every county got their own style, and this is the traditional Breconshire style.
So Montgomeryshire would have a different style, Radnorshire would have a different style.
Yeah,
every different county.
Radnorshires don't use these stakes, or don't use these heather ends.
And that's what you call what you
The
put on top
hazel,
of the
yeah.
hazel on top.
Mostly hazel.
And that's just to hold the hedge down.
Yeah, yeah. We put one of these for every stake.
Right. So that end gets shoved in.
Push them in behind the stake.
Oh, I
about
see, yeah.
6
and then you
inches.
just bend it in and out the stakes then.
Yeah, and then weave it, man.
Oh, that's nice. Almost like basket weaving,
Yeah,
isn't it? This
it is,
top
yeah.
bit now.
Yeah.
And this is a job that you just do in the winter.
Yes. From sort of November till, well, end of March is the cut-off date. Very low now.
Why? And that's because of all the birds nesting and everything else.
yeah,
is it?
birds nesting,
In the head.
yeah.
If I lived here, I'd ask you to teach me how it's done, but I don't. I live in Montgomeryshire,
Oh,
and I
really?
don't want to take Breconshire style back home to
You
Montgomeryshire.
have to come down now.
It would confuse the locals, I think, that would.
Although much of the wood that Trevor puts into the hedge is dead, at the base he has split and bent the original hedge bushes. During the spring and summer, these will grow through the weave and create a fantastic thick hedge which will be a terrific place for wildlife. And it looks a lot better than machine cut hedge or a barbed wire fence. Trevor's hedge at Llanfranach is on the edge of what some call the Brecon beacons proper, the central beacons, and the highest peak, Pen y Fan. The north-facing slopes are steep, having been carved out by glaciers during the Ice Age. The lower slopes on the south side, however, are far gentler. On a snowy winter's day, they're mostly hidden by low cloud. Few venture up the peaks in this weather, not even a fox. There's more to find lower down.
It's not every day you get into a staring match with a fox. I've been watching a fox walking along the edge of the stream here. I think it's a dog. It's quite a big fox in really good condition, got a winter coat and big bushy tail, obviously looking for food. And every now and again it's stopped and it's looked at me, it's looked into my eyes, obviously knows that I'm here. And he's sat over there and then he's gone up a little bit now. And this is actually a reservoir. You wouldn't believe it now, but it's the Upper Naiad Reservoir. And it's been drained for maintenance work along the dam here. And usually the view from here, bear in mind we're 1,500 feet up, is quite spectacular. Looking up towards Pen y Fan on the high tops, but the cloud is down. It's not the best of days for the view, but it's a brilliant day for watching a fox walking in the snow.
I've noticed that snowy, wintry weather often draws out usually secretive animals into the open. The fact is, he's hungry and has to find food, and he knows there's a lot of worms and grubs in the soft mud of the old reservoir bottom. The Brecon Beacons National Park has 18 reservoirs. They were built around 100 years ago to supply drinking water for the growing towns and cities of industrial South Wales.
I've come over to the Tav Valley now, or the Taff as it's often called. And here you've got a succession of 3 reservoirs, all of them providing water to Cardiff. This is Thwynon Reservoir, and on the far side over there you've got the main north-south route, the A470, that really bisects the park itself.
When it's full, Thwynon holds 650 million gallons of water, and with the rain that falls in the beacons, I'd imagine it's full pretty much most of the time.
You can tell that there are plenty of fish in this reservoir because there are lots of fish-eating birds here. way out on the water over there is a male goosander. But far more interesting is this tree, this old larch here right by the water's edge, because it's full of cormorants. I think there are 7 or 8 in there at the moment, and it's the ideal spot for them because you've got 3 reservoirs here in all of them full of fish. So the cormorants can plop into the water, catch a fish, then they can perch up on this tree here, dry their feathers. Once they get hungry again, all they're going to do is pop back down into the water.
Many think of cormorants as seabirds, but while you do see them along the coast, they're just as happy inland, on lakes, reservoirs and rivers. I've noticed that they've increased in number inland during the past 30 years, but no one really knows why. I guess anywhere where there's plenty of fish.
There are lots of conifer plantations within the park, and a lot of it actually is planted in association with these reservoirs. I mean, this is the Tav Valley here, and below me are the Tav reservoirs, and you can see the conifers just about make them out on the far hill there. And this was a mature plantation here too, and what they do is they'll plant them and then they'll cut them down after about 40 years, and that wood will be taken off to be used, and then you're left with fairly bare open areas with a few old trees standing. And this is the perfect location then for a really, really rare bird. Only maybe 8 or 10 birds come to Wales every year, and they come in the winter.
And here it is. It's a great grey shrike. Now it may look like a small timid bird, but don't be fooled by its appearance. This is a ruthless hunter.
This is the tree that the bird was on earlier, and what it's doing is it's using that as a kind of a lookout post. It's got several of them here, but this one appears to be its favoured one, and it's looking down for prey. And at this time of year, prey for it would be probably mice and voles. And at a time when there's plenty of food, what it'll do is it'll find a hawthorn bush or a barbed wire fence, and it'll put mice and voles and large insects on the spines and keep them there for when he's hungry and he can't find food. And that's the reason why another name for this is the butcher bird.
This one has caught a bird. It may well be a robin. It's the commonest bird here. After storing its catch in its secret larder, it returns to clean itself. You can just about see its hooked beak, which it uses to tear up its prey. And he's not the only bird that's using tree stumps. A great spotted woodpecker is looking for insects in the dead wood. As you head west from the central beacons, you enter the Forest Fawr area. Forest Fawr is Welsh for Great Forest, and it was once a royal hunting ground. In the Middle Ages, a forest was a place set aside for hunting. It didn't necessarily describe a large woodland. Although the original deer stock died out more than 2 centuries ago, deer have returned to the park during the past 30 years.
Watching a group of red deer just up on the bank under the trees over there. And these come from a local farmer who was keeping deer, and they escaped. A handful of deer escaped in the 1980s, and some people say that other deer, including a stag, escaped from Margam Park near Port Talbot, worked their way up the Neath Valley, which is all the way, would be maybe best part of 15 odd miles, 20 miles maybe, and joined this herd here.
No one's quite sure of the number of red deer in the Brecon Beacons National Park, but experts reckon this is the only wild red deer herd in the whole of mainland Wales. In the south part of Forest Fawr, the landscape changes from open moorland to deep gorges cut by fast-flowing rivers and wonderful waterfalls. I've been to all of them, and they're all stunning in full flow. There's Sgwd Clun Gwyn on the River Mellter. Its Welsh name is said to mean Fall of the White Meadow. But I have a feeling it may well be a case of lost in translation, as I suspect the word Gwyn, Welsh for white, refers to the white water. Like many of the falls in the area, it's surrounded by fabulous ancient woodland. Sgwd yr Eira on the River Hepse, a tributary of the Mellter, also hints at white water. The name Eira is the Welsh word for snow, so it's the Falls of Snow. It's one of the waterfalls in the beacons that you can actually walk behind.
This area is aptly named Waterfall Country because within an hour of me here there are more than 20 individual waterfalls, and this one, Henryd Falls, is certainly the most impressive and the tallest too, and at 90 feet, that's 27 metres tall. It's the highest waterfall in southern Britain, and on a day like this, following a night of heavy rain, it's at its most magnificent. At the top of the waterfall is a thin layer of very hard rock, and that's called the Farewell Rock, a name given to it by the local coal miners. Because when they were digging deep underground, if they hit this layer of sandstone rock, they knew that they could wave farewell to finding any coal.
I'm always fascinated by waterfalls. They form on rivers where there are different rock types next to each other. The Farewell sandstone rock at the top of Henryd Falls is much harder than mudstone at the bottom. As the mudstone erodes, the falls get gradually taller. And geology plays a big part in how the beacons look. Many of the high peaks of the beacons have an iconic flat top appearance, and this is because they're made of very hard sandstone which is resistant to weathering compared to the softer stones on the surrounding slopes. In the southern part of the beacons, the prevalent rock changes to limestone, and because of the stone's solubility in water, it forms caves underground. These are some of the most impressive caves in Europe. This one, below the uplands of the upper Swansea Valley, has around 50 miles of passages rising and falling to depths of 300 metres. The cave is called Ogoffynnon-ddu. With me is cave guide Anna Stickland. Anna, what an amazing place underground.
It is really beautiful and so varied as well, and often, I'll take little kids caving and sometimes they'll be quite nervous about being underground and think it's all going to be tight or just kind of muddy hole really, is often the impression people have, and they don't realise how varied it is and how beautiful it is.
And Ogoffynnon-ddu here, it's a huge cave system, isn't it?
It is, yeah. We've only seen a tiny part of it, but yeah, it's a big system. It's also a very deep system because at the moment we're quite low down, we're quite near where the water comes out into the river. But you can follow it all the way through and you can come out on top of the mountain. So as well as being lots of passage, it's also quite a hiked change.
And I always think of caves as something things that were formed, millions of years ago, because it's still going on all the time now.
Yeah, it is. It's a continual process. And so, yeah, originally it was formed millions of years ago and just through tiny gaps and cracks in the rocks. So where you've got the bedding planes and you've got the fault lines. And so water can get into the tiny little cracks and then gradually it will get bigger and bigger. Initially through sort of a corrosive action, and then once the water can start to flow, you'll get erosion going on. And it gets bigger and bigger and bigger.
There are literally hundreds of caves in the beacons, and while some of them are open to the public and easy to explore, most are only accessible to hardened cavers. And in these hidden chambers, there are stunning sights deep underground. West of Forest Fawr lie the Carmarthen Vans. Many of the mountains in the Brecon Beacons are called Vans. It's simply the Welsh word for a beacon, and the name Beacons dates back to a time when people would light fires on visible peaks to warn of attacks from intruders. I'm with National Park Warden Judith Harvey, who lives just below these magnificent peaks. She's taking me to one of the finest views in the whole of the Beacons.
Judith, what a place. What a place. And we've got what, Llyn Van Fach below us.
Yeah.
And Van Foel now, that's the highest mountain in Carmarthenshire.
That's right, yes.
Yeah, because we've come over the border now to Carmarthenshire.
Yeah,
And looking out this way as well, it's stunning. I love these rolling hills here.
Yeah. And then down in the valley, all the patchwork of farmland and hedges and trees.
And all these houses and small holdings, you know, you can only see from up on high like this.
Absolutely, yeah.
We often think about national parks worldwide as places empty of people, you know, places there for the landscape, for the wildlife. But of course, Brecon Beacons is very different, isn't it?
It is very different in that the Park Authority owns a lot of the land. We own the land that we're standing on here, which is very unusual for a British National Park. But obviously people, farmers have got interests up here. This is common land, so farmers have got the right to graze sheep, and in some cases cattle and even geese up here, though we don't never see geese on the hill these days. And then there's the pressure from walkers and tourism. You know, we've walked up a path that's been made by the National Park to try and limit the pressure of erosion. So, you know, it's a balancing act. We've got to try and accommodate all sorts of pressures within this very, very precious landscape.
Somebody once told me that this is the roof of South Wales.
Yep.
And it is right, isn't it? Because from here you can see virtually everywhere in South Wales.
It's one of my favourite sights in the Beacons. It's a place where you can be totally alone. As Judith said, the National Park's character comes as much from the people who live and work in the Beacons as the natural forces that shaped it. And on the slopes of Mynydd Myddfai near Llandyfri, Kate Mobbs Morgan is one of the many people who make it such a special place.
Back, love. Good boy. Back, love.
Kate, I've got to tell you, you've made an old man very happy, because watching you at work here, it took me back to when I was a little lad, when they still used horses in woodlands in mid-Wales.
Yeah.
But this must be unique in the park now, is it?
It is unusual. I would say maybe 2 people working horses in forestry in this locality. Yeah.
But it's lovely to watch. I love the way that you work with the horse, talking all the time, the horse listening all the time as well.
He is listening. I think sometimes he blurs out the white noise in between, but he's listening for his commands all the time.
And it's the way that you talk as well, you know, it's as if it isn't a horse, it's a mate working with you in the woods.
Well, we work together all the time, so it is like having a friend working with me, so yeah.
What is the horse? What breed
He's
is
an
it?
Ardennes. They come from France and Belgium. He was homebred in the UK, but they're a French horse.
Oh, it's a
still
lovely,
bred for
lovely
work.
horse. And strong,
Thank you.
incredibly strong.
Very strong, yeah.
What's the advantage then? You know, why use a horse? Why not get some tractors in?
On sites like this, we can come into the steep sites. We don't need big tracks cut into the woodlands. We can just work between the trees. So something like this, where you're selective thinning and you're just taking out a few trees, we can just work within the environment without causing any damage. And again, working on the steep sites where it's difficult to get in with machinery, it's just as quick to use a horse.
Next time, it'll be spring in the Brecon Beacons. A season when both the landscape and wildlife wakes up. see Iolo back in the Beacons on Monday night here on BBC One Wales at the same time, 7:30. And if you can't wait until then, pick up that laptop now. You can see his 10 must-see locations at bbc.co.uk/Wales.